MGM, we are back, and do we have an amazing guest for you today? But first, a couple of quick notes for our community. Last week, we were able to work with POAP to get into their newsletter to announce W. You might know it as a CPG holder as the rewards program. We are excited to offer that up to anybody who wants to come and speak with us and use it. It's a very diverse tool, and we're very excited to launch it and share it with the community. We also hope that everybody is enjoying their summer of touching grass. We do have a couple more things in store. Raf and Caitlin have been working hard on the accelerator. A lot more announcements coming out about that soon. We also have been cooking up some wonderful things with Trom. So please do stay tuned. Hit us up in the chats. We're excited to see you. But in the meantime, we hope you're touching grass. I am excited and pleased to announce our next guest on the Genius Call, this is our 29th Genius Call. I can't believe we've been going that long. But it is Luca Netz, the CEO of Pudgy Penguins. For anybody who's not aware, Pudgy Penguins is an NFT collection of these adorable little cartoon penguins. In April 2022, Luca took up the leadership of this project, and since acquiring Pudgy's, Luca has turned Pudgy Penguins into like a crazy success story beyond Web3. And that's one of the main reasons we love to bring them on. In May, the company introduced a physical line of plushies and figurines called Pudgy Toys. The launch of these collectibles just crushed it on Amazon with over $500,000 in sales volume over 2 days. We are going to dive into the early part of Luca's career, a lot of the lessons that he learned there. He's pretty much an expert in making things go viral, which we're all excited to do. We'll touch on some of his other CMO experience. If anybody's ever heard of Von Dutch, we're going to get into that, as well as if you have kids or you don't and you just love Nerf and/or things, there's the Gel Blasters toy. We'll talk a little bit about his playbook for taking that to a crazy great business as well. So, Luca, welcome. Thanks for having us on. How's things going?
I'm touching grass, man, doing a little bit of touching grass, but things are going well. How about you?
Yeah, it's been a great summer to really focus on some of the great announcements in Web3. I think for folks that are still around, of which we've seen some people leave, some of those projects vacate the scenes, it's been really good to just stay focused, really concentrate on the community, and then concentrate on what comes next for crypto, which I think has a really great run just around the corner and ahead of us.
It's coming. I think we got out on the other side of it. The worst of it, I think, has happened, and I think now we are in that little bit of purgatory that we have to stay in for the next 6 to 12 months before we have to go where we need to go. But I think we definitely got across the worst side of it.
I agree, and I hope that we're both correct on that. I would love to kind of set the scene for our listeners, and so, for context, we have the accelerator that comes around. We do cohorts every 6 months. We've had a couple of them now. We are really interested in bringing experts on, and without a doubt, your marketing expertise, and both in social and in traditional marketing, has really taken this kind of NFT world by storm. Can you talk to us, though, about a little bit before you hit the crypto and Web3 side of it? You had a really interesting childhood. Can you fill in the audience on some of how that shaped your particular view of the world?
Yeah, not to give you the super long version, but I grew up with my mom homeless, bouncing around state to state, country to country for about 10 years, just staying in guest bedrooms and, couches that would kind of let us crash. So 10 different schools, 14 different locations, and not all of it was terrible. Some of the times we would stay at a friend who lived in the Hamptons. So I think what that gave me was a lot of perspective and a lot of understanding of the duality of life, to be dirt poor and also be in situations where you're super rich. And so I think that's a fascinating perspective to garner early on in life. I think perspective is a really powerful tool if you know to utilize it. Ended up in my teenage years in Los Angeles, grew up a bad kid, skateboarding, smoking weed, graffiti, doing the whole nine. But I think that also gave me a lot of understanding to culture. I think LA is one of the hubs of the world when it comes to culture, and specifically street culture. And I then took my talents to Fairfax High School, where I shortly dropped out soon after I was there for about a year. Sophomore year, I leave school. I get a job at a company called Ring Doorbell. I'm one of their early employees. I stay there for about 2 to 2.5 years. I then go and start my first company, which is selling jewelry online. I found product market fit really easily, or luckily, with influencer marketing. Influencer marketing was not tapped at the time. I think this was around 2016, 2017. So if you were around doing consumer product goods around there, or direct to consumer around that time, you know kind of what I'm talking about. It was almost like a money printer. And I basically, within 3 months, went from a broke kid who was coasting the clock at Ring Doorbell to making $1 million a month on my online store. Pretty freaked out. Learned all of the hard ways. Lost, at this point, probably $10+ million learning mistakes. Sold that business when I was 19, started my next company, which was monetizing social influence. So I basically leaned into the strategy that had made the first business so successful. And I realized I didn't really need to build brands around, I didn't really need to build brands and then pay the influencers. I could kind of just partner with them and move product through their audience. That actually was the wrong way to do it. The first way that I did it was actually the best way, but this new way. Yeah.
I would love to dive into specifically the jewelry brand pre-exit. You had a playbook that you sort of have refined over the years, it feels like, and it's interesting. You sort of I went here and then that was the wrong playbook. Can you set the tone a bit in terms of what was happening on the direct to consumer and the influencer side of the house around that time period, like both the tools and what was happening in social at that time that you had kind of picked up on?
Yeah, I had found basically the jewelry business was selling like hip hop jewelry. And so the thesis there was how do I find a high margin product with low returns? Because everything that I was selling prior to that I was finding too much friction and just returns and sizing issues. And I thought, okay, well, what can I sell that has no sizing issues, that people want, low return rate, fast shipping, like no friction on shipping and weights and dimensions and that disaster. And then the statistic that really got me to think in this direction was hip hop was the fastest growing genre in music. And me being a huge hip hop fan, how did I want to look like my favorite rapper, where I wanted to wear a gold chain or, some gold rings or some diamond rings, but I couldn't afford it. Well, thankfully for me, there's, $30, $40, $50 products on the internet that can give you the same bling and the same dopamine that wearing a $50,000 chain or a ring will give you. And so it had all of the pros of, when you're kind of checking off the boxes of what makes a successful direct to consumer business. And then I couldn't make the Google ads and the Facebook ads work, which is crazy at the time because those were also really easy to make work, but I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't working for me the way that it was working for some of my peers or some of the people that I was looking up to at the time. And so what made sense to me was, I want to get rappers to promote these products. That's kind of why I created this brand. Instead of going to the rappers directly, I went to their fan pages. So I couldn't afford a Little Pump at the time, who would cost $100,000 for an Instagram post. But Little Pump fan page XOX, who has 200,000 followers, who has 200,000 of his exact follower base, arguably his most devoted fans, is charging me $100 for a post. So I'd pay him $100. I'd make back $2,000 on the conversion for the day. And then I'd just rinse and repeat. And then I'd just scale the process out. And basically for 12 hours a day, I was just procuring these fan pages and then kind of scaling. And then eventually I had enough money to actually pay the celebrity or the rapper themselves. And then I'd pay the rapper $20,000 and the rapper would make me back $200,000. And then I would just rinse and repeat the cycle. What I ultimately figured out was that influencers and celebrities, though it looked like they made a lot of money, they actually weren't making a lot of money, or at least at the time. And to be frank, I still think this reigns true today. Though there is a subsection of influencers and celebrities that make a ton of money, there is also a subsection that you think make a ton of money, but actually don't. And that is kind of the inspiration for the second business. Is after I sold the first business, kind of changed my life. I realized, well, how about I just find all of these other celebrities and influencers who are portraying a life of wealth and fortune, but don't actually have it, and then come to them with a business value proposition that, removes all of the headache and all of the friction from their end, and then just monetize their influence through consumer products. And I had these insane dashboards of, $300,000 days, $400,000 days, $500,000 days that, anybody that I spoke to, gave it a shot. And we probably had like an 80% hit rate. Like if I signed somebody, any given time, we probably had, I think at most like 200 people, live stores running. And even if they were, sometimes a store would make as little as $1,000 a day, and it didn't matter. It was the compound effect. The problem is where the mistake ended up being was I was actually right in the first thesis. And you see, companies like Fashion Nova and what Rich did over there. The thesis was actually to just have one brand conglomerate and then use all of these guys to support the brand and build brand equity. What I actually did is I actually segmented. My way was more of a lazy and passive income way. It was very much, set up the assembly line of standing up the business, getting the products into the fulfillment warehouse, website set up, and then influencer and celebrity promoting the landing page, versus building this brand entity, building brand equity, getting all the traffic driven there. I was thinking more of like, how can I create maximum cash flow? Because when you go from like poor to like making tons of money, you're optimizing for cash flow. You're not optimizing for brand equity. Biggest lesson I learned is you always have to optimize for brand equity. It's worth so much more than any amount of cash flow that you can generate. And I ultimately,
nice,
yeah, I know it definitely, look, it is what it is, but it was one of those golden moments that a couple people, whether there's certain SaaSes like Honey, there's, obviously great direct to consumer brands like Fashion Nova, certain people who caught on and then were able to, build, multi-billion dollars in brand equity and enterprise value that at the end of the day was priceless. I still came out of there, with a business that ended up grossing, north of $200 million as a complete cash cow of a business, put me in a position where I could comfortably say that if I were to stop working today, I'd be pretty good for the rest of my life, though definitely a lot more to accomplish before that happens. It's not financially motivated, but it was a great business to say the least, and definitely the one that made my career. I think a lot of people know me through my association with some of the biggest celebrities and influencers, and kind of my ability to monetize and make a lot of people a lot of money. And again, that reputation has been able to take me to where I am today, and I'm thankful for that experience.
On your day to day, what was the signal that you looked for, or did you kind of, like you had said, you had kind of fractured or atomized it out over the course? Are there things that are just continually in the playbook that you're like, this is something that I can go to now and it will work, as opposed to catching like the zeitgeist of the moment and having an eye for it? Because I think you probably got to have a little bit of both. But where do you think the split falls in terms of somebody who wants to approach this method that you're using today? Where are they splitting their time in terms of learning about the, like you said, the manufacturing supply, like the line of making the sites continually or building a brand continually, or catching on to what's the latest trend and thread that keeps things moving?
Yeah, I think that the infrastructure side of that business, or just in general, I think it's not rocket science. I think people spend too much time on the infrastructure and the details. I'm honestly, if you're asking me my superpower, like outside of marketing and I think it's just relationships. I think what made that business and that whole funnel so successful, I had a competitive edge at the time, and I think it was my Achilles heel, but also my biggest strength. It was my biggest strength for procuring deals and signing people, because I was the same age as all of the people that I was working with. So I wasn't coming in like this like father figure, which a lot of these younger cats have a problem with. I was coming in as like a friend, and we could see eye to eye because we were basically the same age. And they believed that I was smart, and I had built a lot of trust in the industry at that moment in time. So that really boded in my favor. The infrastructure, not so much. At the end of the day, my age led me to be really lazy in that business. I look back at it and I'm so regretful as to how lazy I was with that business, because even the right legal structure would have made the brand equity in that business very valuable. I didn't even organize it the same way. I mean, think about it. In 3 years, $250 million in sales, 3.5 years. I mean, I should have had a 9-figure exit on that business, but it was so divided. It was so silly that I would stand up an LLC for every single person that I signed. I was building real core entities around. It was just like unbelievable. But the thing is with me is I had no mentor. There was no guidance. There was no family member. There was no friend of a family in my corner. Anybody that I leaned to, I have a really good intuition. So I felt like just people were trying to sleaze me and just saw this huge money opportunity. And so a lot of it was just like entirely learning it myself and figuring it out myself. In hindsight, I made a huge mistake in how I structured and organized that business that I think ultimately probably cost me $100 million. But I think the playbook has now since been refined. Like now I very much have a playbook that I think is a plug and play system. Obviously it varies between different brands. Like a Gel Blaster and a Pudgy Penguins are different, and a Pudgy Penguins and a Von Dutch is different. It's not entirely the same, but the outline is the same. And so you got to maybe identify the details and refine the details within the outline, but the outline and the structure still remains the same.
Yeah. So before we go there, I would love to figure out and hear how you got into crypto specifically, because for sure the Gel Blasters, Von Dutch, and Pudgy Penguins have this beautiful kind of Venn diagram that you place yourself at the center of. This is a crypto podcast. This is Web3 specifically. Where were you first exposed to Bitcoin or Ethereum, or like, what was it?
Yeah, 2016, I was looking to park my money. My brother's a supercomputer nerd, computer genius, and I was buying 1080 Ti's from AMD, and I honestly, in my first apartment that I got, I had 8 rigs, all 8 cards in each rig. I was mining Digibyte, complete idiot. Only the one thing you shouldn't have mined was Digibyte in 2016. I became a Litecoin litinaire, which I call a Litecoin millionaire. So I was buying Litecoin at like $10 on Coinbase, on the Coinbase app, and like Bitcoin was running from like 300 to 600 bucks. Everyone was freaking out. Bag held that thing all the way through, but believed in there's a interesting thing that really makes me believe about crypto, and it makes me believe about certain industries, and that's why I went all in NFTs, which is really what I believe, if you were to define it to me, is digital ownership. I believe digital ownership and crypto, which would be the freedom to transact and to own that transaction. These to me fall under a category that we call basic human rights, the basic human right category. And I think anything that is fundamentally should be a basic human right ultimately wins and makes tons of money for anybody who is early in this. And so I still think we're early, even with crypto being 10 years old and NFTs specifically. But there's been moments in time throughout history where industries are formed and categories are formed around this basic human right narrative, which is, products or solutions that, when you kind of peel back the layers, are basic human rights. Like, okay, if the world is digital, then I should be able to own my digital assets, and I should be able to do whatever I want with them because it's a basic human right. And if I have money, like $1 million, and my grandmother is dying in Paris and I want to go send her $500,000, I should be able to send that to her pretty quickly, without any friction or somebody in the middle. Be a basic human right. Or maybe if I wanted to communicate to somebody internationally, I should be able to just pick up my iPhone and FaceTime audio them, and you shouldn't be charged an arm and a leg for that, right? Like, the ability to email and interconnect. When you just like really peel back those categories that have kind of fallen into basic human rights, they've always exploded and yielded huge returns for investors and founders who decided to build in those industries. And that's honestly, eventually why I came into NFTs, is I just started collecting, huge hoarder of things. Growing up with nothing, I always was like bummed at show and tell, like showing my fucking rock and my piece of paper of nothingness. So the second I got money, I just started buying cool shit. And so once the problem with cool shit is it takes up a lot of space, and eventually I was running out of space. And then I found NFTs through, stock market Twitter, which I've been on for 6 years. Ever since I had money, I've been a huge advocate of stock market Twitter. One of the guys I knew was, get into this NFT thing, NFT summer, started collecting one-of-one artists. Second, I bought my first NFT and saw it in my wallet, I just got like a huge bug. And I said, this is obvious, right? Like this is, you just know things naturally. And sometimes we let the market and other people's opinions sway us our way from what we know is true. And this is just one of those things that my stomach and my gut was just like, dude, this is unequivocally the future. Figure out a way to participate. Try to buy out my friend's project before Pudgy. Didn't work. It was like actually ended up ruining a really great friendship because of that whole debacle. And then Pudgy Penguins came to me in my lap December of, I think, 2021. And writing on the wall was such an obvious buy that I made the decision to buy it. And 3 months later, we owned it.
Fantastic. So kind of a bunny path question, but it'll circle back. What is your favorite, and I know this is going to be tough, your favorite physical collectible that you own?
It's actually this artist. It's actually, give him a lot of credit. He's a lesser known artist in Los Angeles named Sage Willows. He has this art style. It's called color. It's like draws these dots. And it's like he considers it like color therapy when you stare into the painting. And I guess there's collectibles. We could go down a pretty deep line of like actual collectibles, but to me, art constitutes that. And I'm also a huge fan of Peter Lick, who's a photographer. I'm a huge nature guy, so I'm like I've got like way too many Peter Licks in my house. It's not like the most apprised, like appreciating, like most fiscally responsible, just because if you understand how he actually schemes it up, it's pretty ingenious. His model is a really great business model, but I love his photos. I mean, I just get mesmerized by it. So I think Peter Lick and Sage Willows would be my two favorite physical collector pieces. If we're including art, if we're including like statues and something else or figures, but that'd be my main two go-tos.
So you became extremely successful. You start buying physical things. You make a NFT purchase of art, and then the light bulb goes on bright, and you go all in. You had the opportunity, and you purchased Pudgy's, and it, as you had said, it's like apparent. So what was your mindset? You have Pudgy's in hand. You have this great playbook. Like, what was the impetus of like, all right, the first thing I'm going to do with Pudgy's is X, and it worked. And then things that you had really experienced maybe with Von Dutch or Gel Blasters, and you're like, ooh, this actually isn't working. Like, what's the entrance there?
Yeah, so I think initially we came in, part of my frustration being like a huge collector, had spent millions of dollars of NFTs. I was just so fed up with everyone calling themselves a brand, and they had tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, and they did nothing of what a real brand does. And so I was like, I'm going to buy this thing. I'm going to come in with no money in the bank, and I'm going to show you guys how to freaking build a brand. That's exactly what we did. And so I think first steps for us was I didn't buy a business. I bought assets. So we had to stand up the business. So like first month and a half was, how do you get all of the usernames so that they're cohesive? Every username for Pudgy Penguins was pudgy.penguins or pudgy_penguins. So I got at Pudgy Penguins on every social media. I got it verified on every social media, all the way down to the YouTube, to the Snapchat, to the Instagrams and TikToks and the whole nine. Got the whole brand cohesive, because it just was incredibly messy. Did the foundational work, obviously, legal infrastructure, employee handbooks, things like that. Policies, like it just was nothing. I actually thought the business would be more of something, but I actually think most NFT and crypto businesses are a bunch of assets. I don't think they actually stand them up appropriately. This is just my pulse on what I've observed so far. Get insurance, there's just 2 months of that. And then about 2 months in, after you're done doing all of that, a lot of, what we're doing, at least in the beginning, was, align with the community on the vision, build back trust, did a lot of fiscally irresponsible things. We threw like a monster yacht party with like Tory Lanez performing. It cost me like 120 grand that I honestly couldn't afford for really 100 people. But doing everything that we can or to like prove that the community should trust us and that like we're here to build and, kind of bring the bad taste out of their mouth. And then unfortunately, after we do all of that, the market just goes nuclear in the opposite direction. We go from, our 0.8 ETH to 4 ETH. We retrace all the way back to 1. I'm sweating. Company is, went from making, $400,000 a month on a bad month through royalties to $20,000 a month. I had spent a lot of the money on building back trust, right? Setting up things like brand Bibles and, positioning, just like the right way to do it, especially with a character brand like that. Like with like this, it just requires so much creative foundational muscle work that just cost a fortune, just not cheap. Like and if you do it cheaply, you're going to get screwed. So then after 2 months of just ultra communication, building back trust, setting up foundational, business infrastructure work, the market just goes completely the other direction. I'm freaking out because at this point I have to put another $500,000 into the business because the business is not sustaining itself. So now we're $3 million into this thing. It's coming to the point where they're talking about removing royalties. And I'm like, how are you thinking about removing royalties when we're making no money on royalties, when the market is belly up? That's exactly counterintuitive to how you like disincentivizing the creator is not how you're going to bring more liquidity in. It's like actually the opposite. It's like completely fool's game. I'm going to start taking a really aggressive approach here soon because I think there's like Muppets running around that need to be quelled, but neither here nor there.
Double click into that for sure. Cause I think it's probably one of the more interesting debates that's happened ongoing. But yeah, we can circle back on it. So you go hardcore, you make the business a business, build up the assets, the timing, like everything, there's a lovely curveball that hits you. When did you start to think about the merchandising part? Was that like a going in position goal, or was it something almost out of necessity from the timing of the creator and or a need to kind of diversify? Like, how did you come up with what was going to happen with Pudgy?
We knew that was step one, right? I think coming into this off the backs of Gel Blaster, I didn't realize how big the toy business was and how many brands that you've never heard of are incredibly successful, selling hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of toys and merchandise every single year. It's like a humongous category. No idea it was that big. And I knew that was kind of step number one. The problem is that's a really deep pipeline. And when you kind of are seeing historical data of like $300,000-$400,000 a month in royalty revenue, I knew it was one of the first things that we needed to do, but it wasn't the first thing I did the moment I took over the company. Like there was just so much nothing, and trust was like completely fractured. Like this wasn't like a democratic process. Like I very much was bidding against somebody who, like it didn't seem, I guess from a community standpoint, there was like two okay picks and options. And I very much had to prove, I knew being a consumer of NFTs, what this business required, and this business required, huge leadership and people to rally behind that leadership. I understood that was the X factor that was going to differentiate success versus failure. And so naturally, though consumer products was on top of mind, the business was so fragmented and honestly was a pile of nothingness from a business standpoint that it wasn't until the third month that my focus was almost accelerated because of just this vertical nuke. And I saw the writing on the wall. I said, this thing is about to get unbelievably ugly. I know product cycles from start to finish take 8 to 12 months. And that's if you're Speedy Gonzalez, right? And thankfully, I have an elite team that I've worked with for a long time, so I knew we could push the boundary. But then I also knew that if I really wanted to get into the mass market toy business, I really actually needed a master toy partner. To think that I'm going to go and tackle that endeavor solo dolo with $500,000 or $600,000 in the bank, with just wasn't. So about third month in, I hyper prioritize, finding a master toy partner and, building out this toy line. Within 3 weeks, we signed our deal. Within 3 weeks after that, we kind of make an announcement saying we're licensing from the community, which was kind of like a barrier, a narrative shift within the space. No projects were licensing IP directly from their community. They were like, a lot of people were just following the Bored Ape model, which was, hey, go license, when I actually think that's not the right model. I actually think it's a good model, and I think it's one of the models, but I actually think the better model is saying I need to build a brand, I need to make content, I need to make product, and I'm going to license the IP from the holders. I think it's the lowest hanging utility is actually licensing. So we did that for our toy line. That gave us our first big momentum out of the abyss of hell, that I would like to refer to it as. And then we start trending upwards and start getting momentum. And I think ever since then, it's kind of been this upwards trend of just continuing to succeed and lead the NFT market.
With the trust building in the community, what were some of the lessons? Like you covered a lot of ground when you talked about that emphasis on building trust. For the state of the broad Web3, specifically NFT communities now, what are advice that you would give to folks in terms of do this but don't do that? Or is it, I think less on the community specific, but how do you feel like you actually were able to press that? And what was the summation of it?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I think probably the most valuable information that I can give the audience listening, because I honestly, frankly, think we do this one of the best. I think there's probably us and maybe a Frank from DGods, and I think everyone in the space would agree we're probably clear leaders here. And I think it's for good reason. I think the first one, you learn this from consumer products, but the customer's always right. I'm in no business to go fight with people and tell them, I'm not a fighter in respect to, look, I respect the fact that you believe and that you hold this asset. I don't ignore that. I'm not negligent of that fact. And I'm not here, we can disagree, but I'm not here to fight and argue. And I think a lot of founders in this space will take a different approach. I think the next one is you have to have a clear understanding that if this is truly a Web3 business, what it means to run a Web3 business, it's important to understand what it means. And to me, it means a Web3 business is a congregate of brains that are congregating to build a product or a brand together, right? It's crowd intelligence versus your intelligence. And I think crowd intelligence will win every time. It's my job as the leader and this head of the snake to extrapolate the good ideas and to push them through and to muscle them through and to put the bad ideas to the side. I think that is where I think my skill set really comes in, is to kind of filter out what's good and what's bad. But a lot of people think they sell digital pictures on the blockchain and they think they're a Web3 business. And I actually completely disagree. Web3 is not defined by the technology. I think it's defined by the ethos. And I think more people need to understand that. A lot of people, I think, are Web2 businesses selling digital products on the blockchain and think they're a Web3 business, and that is not the case. I think the sooner that people realize that delineation between working with a group to build something versus working, as maybe a core team, that those are the core differentiating factors. Whether you're using blockchain or crypto, this is where the space is lacking adoption, why it's tapered down. No one really knows what the heck they're talking about. They just keep forcing this narrative of blockchain and crypto and tech and new iterations as the all and be all for why everyone is here and what is driving adoption, when in reality it's not that. It's actually the culture. This is a culturally driven business. I say this about PFPs. I haven't really said it publicly, but I'll say it here. These are culturally driven products. The people that are failing because they just don't understand culture truly, right? That's why they think that, ex-Disney executives and Warner executives and guys from Meta and Google and the whole nine can come in here because they think these are technically driven businesses. And I actually completely disagree. Crypto could be a technically driven business, but I think the PFP business, right, which is the profile picture business, is a culturally driven business. And the people who understand culture and understand the people are the ones that succeed, and the ones that don't do not. And so I ultimately think this is a really important thing to digest and to understand. And you really have to believe that to your core if you're going to win here. Like, I came into Pudgy Penguins and I could have easily said, if you think about it, I could have easily said, I paid this thing for $2.5 million. This is my vision and this is my plan. I could have easily done that. I spent $2.5 million for it. At that moment in time, I was probably the most invested person in Pudgy Penguins after that transaction, right? No one can tell me shit, right? I could have easily let the ego run rampant and took in that mindset. But instead, I came in day one and I said, hey, what do you guys think this project needs? What was your vision for it? What made you fall in love with it? Because I'm very much the muscle that is the hive mind, that is the community, right? I'm very much the person pushing the ideas through and maybe massaging them in directions, whether it's left or right. But at the end of the day, this is not, Luca just wakes up one morning and thinks he wants to do something and it's just going to get done. I don't think that is the right approach to build a business like this. And I honestly think if you're telling the story of Web3 and Web3 IP and what it means to be Web3's first great IP company, like, you have to be different than traditional IP businesses. I have no interest to be like Disney. I want to be the next iteration and the next generation of Disney. I want to show Disney that the power of the people is greater than the power of the monopoly. And I believe it's going to work over time.
There was a lot to unpack there, and I really appreciate you being so candid about your ethos. What it sounds like is your primary function as the leader, because I think you can say CEO, and there's a lot more to it than just that. Like, CEO is one of the kind of under the umbrella of leader, is you're continually listening and then driving focus and execution, because there's a lot of things to go chase. Always, and then doing things well for the things you do chase is of the utmost importance, because then, like, I'm still reading the chat that we're having on the side of people going, lost $100 million and learned from it. Like, it's kind of crazy that's an impressive just stat to throw out there. What about Web3 and specifically the toy part of it? Like, we've just covered that you said it's culture. This is community. This is people. This is culture. This is flex. These are things that I do think at some level Disney understands that. They have the price points that run from things you can buy in like Five Below all the way to $10,000 a day trips to Disney that are, VIP passes at Disneyland. So they understand the wide array there. What in terms of the vision for Pudgy Penguins in Web3 do you see as being this frontier based off of where Web3 is right now? Like, what's the next immediate thing? Because you've launched the physical side of it, and now what's your next act?
Yeah, I think to understand the next act is to understand really the mission, which the mission is like, how do you democratize IP and change the narrative from brand and consumer, and that being the only relationship, to adding another relationship in the equation, which is brand and participant, and then brand and consumer, right? Like, I think Web3 IP, when you think about what is going to be that delineation and that innovative factor that kind of just flips the IP business on its head, which is an archaic business to say the least, I think it's going to be the participant angle. I think people want to participate and they want to collect, and they want to collect more than first editions that just do nothing and were printed early. Like, they need to do more, right? Like, why are we just so complacent with 100 years of these first editions doing nothing? Like, let's innovate. Let's bring IP on the forefront of innovation. That and the toy business are one of the two most archaic consumer-facing businesses of them all. Yet they're two of the most powerful. Yet they've have not even an ounce of innovation, and nobody's even trying. And I don't know unequivocally if this is 100% the right way. I mean, I'm not a fortune teller, but somebody's got to go try something that's different. And I think this technology presents an interesting moment to give it a shot. I think what is really our next steps. Ultimately you have to win the physical product game. And so a lot of my thesis here is I'm actually a firm believer that, what is going to bring millions of people to trading NFTs? Like, truly, what is that? And to me, the answer would be being able to take the lunch of a Disney or a Warner or a Pixar so that they can go and throw their A players here so they can really go create amazing products in this space. Because if they can do that and they can bring their IPs and their fan bases here, you will onboard more people into the blockchain, more real users, more real collectors than any single catalyst or any single partnership outside of that. And so what are you going to do to excite a Warner or a Disney or a Pixar? For me, it's taking their lunch. It's showing them this is real and this is serious, and that them not participating is actually losing them market share. And if I can show that and I can prove that, they're going to take this very seriously. And they're going to say, hey, right now we have our rookies here, because right now they do. It's all ex people who have been in Disney who are no longer at the company, or, new people who are trying to prove their shot and are taking, predatory approaches because they just want to prove that they made the company revenue so they can move up the ranks and, a higher salary bump and maybe a position bump, right? Like nobody really genuinely cares at any of these companies, right? They're just there to solely, see if they can make something stick and kind of throw things at the wall. But I believe if you can really shake up their traditional world, right, where they currently are, meet them where they currently are, take a piece of their pie, then they are going to try to come where I am. And if they come where I am, that is where this space is going to, see huge adoption. And that's where we're going to write our legacy and write, Pudgy Penguins into the history books, and where this becomes, a generational and legacy IP because of the history of what it's done, just outside of, our achievements or how we push boundaries. And so, what that means to me, I think, is I got to go crush the physical products. $500,000 on Amazon is taking nobody's lunch. It's taking lunch from the ants. We got to take lunch from the giants. And so I've got to do significantly bigger drops. I've got to, show that we're, have demand around this character, around this IP. We have to show that we're growing faster, that we're, bigger and better than the rest of them. And I think as we kind of, dominate that cycle, in the interim, there's plethora of things that we have that are coming that I think are necessary for the space. We have, a huge innovation in licensing that we'll be releasing pretty soon. We have some amazing announcements with some amazing partners coming up in the next coming months. But most importantly, money talks, revenue talks, and growth talks. And, that's at the end of the day, my priority is how do I take the lunch and the viewership of their existing audiences so that they can take this seriously. And if they take this seriously, then everyone who's involved and everyone who's building here will be well off.
I almost feel like we should end there, but we're not gonna, because that was a hell of a diatribe that I think is worth listening to a few times. For our audience, we do a POAP every time that we have a genius call. So if you find the secret word, which will be released now, this is a pre-recorded one, go redeem your POAP. It's a pretty great stylized one from our team. So please take the time to do that. It will be open for a short window. You've got this long-term vision of what you want to do. And you have in your mind, as you've said it a number of times, the hypothesis of how to make that happen. I have a note here to ask you about Project Overpass. And so I think we're gonna wind down with what you are thinking about for Project Overpass, and any sort of alpha you can give us. Would love to also have that. We've had some pretty epic alphas dropped here. No pressure, maybe a little bit. So what's Project Overpass, and then what are some things you can tease that are in the more immediate pipeline?
Yeah, I think for us, Project Overpass solves one of the great problems in Web3, which is, when we licensed our 16 NFTs from our 16 holders for the PMI toy deal, I asked myself, well, this seems like the most obvious utility that you can give your NFT holder. Why has nobody done it? And the answer was because it was a pain in the ass. It was a huge pain in the butt to license all that. Even 16 people, it doesn't seem like much, but it was a huge pain in the ass to get 16 people to agree to a licensing deal to turn their penguin into a toy. And in reality, if licensing is going to solve a huge problem for NFTs, which I think is utility, right? For anybody who wants to build a brand, leveraging a NFT to kind of crowdsource your first, use of funds, or your first use of community, or your first, group of community. Licensing, I think, is an amazing way to translate that value back to NFT holders. So how are you going to license at scale? And how are you going to do it with a couple clicks of a button? In my mind, there's this elephant in the room where Luca, you can license maybe 50 products a year from holders, but how are you going to license all 8,888 penguins, right? Well, I make 200 gifts a week, 150 gifts a week. I make, 10, 15, Instagram, or in this case, 7 Instagram posts a week, right? Like, content's a pretty easy way to scale. So maybe I paid you for the right to use your penguin in a Giphy or an Instagram post or a TikTok post. Maybe that is the thesis. And if I wanted to accomplish that, or I wanted to do anything at scale, I needed to solve that problem. And I needed to solve that problem not only for Pudgy Penguins, but if we're going to solve that problem for us, we might as well solve it for everyone else. And so that's where Project Overpass came in, was how do you license NFT IP at scale with a couple clicks of a button, the same way that you would buy an NFT on OpenSea for a couple clicks of a button. It really should be that easy, right? I want to license something. I see a deal, a person who made a deal sees which NFTs have submitted to be a part of that. There's an upfront payment. Right now, it's going to be very bare bones just to kind of test it out, but upfront payments, non-exclusive rights. Once you get into exclusivity and things like that, you've got to start staking the NFT and it's got to be locked up. So to avoid any lockups or anything weird, look, you want to use a Pudgy Penguin in the game, you have a budget of $5,000, 100 Pudgy Penguins will submit. You pick the one that you want. You pay the person $5,000. You now have the non-exclusive right to use that Pudgy Penguin in your game, and you'll get the support of the community, and they'll be able to trailblaze and support that initiative, right? And then on to the next. And so how can you do that with a couple clicks of a button and really monetize that IP that everybody says is valuable? For us, it's been something that we've been championing for a long time. We have billions of views across, all of our social medias. And why does that matter? Well, it matters if you want to get licensing deals, right? Because licensing deals gets procured if you have influence, and if putting that character on a product is going to, create more downloads or create more sales. And right now, that Pudgy Penguin thesis remains true. If you put a Pudgy Penguin on a product or a game or a software, you will get more traffic there than if you didn't. I think most people would agree with that. And if you don't, there's some interesting case studies to contradict the disagreement. But that's what Project Overpass solves for. And I guess some alpha is we have the support of the biggest and the best in the industry. We're definitely not number one yet, but it's nice to see that number one does support what we're doing, and excited to roll that out to the world shortly. We've had it ready in the pipeline for a little bit. We're refining it, kind of waiting to see what's up with the market. I'm very much in the business of making moments. I'm not in the business of just releasing things and it not being a moment. Right now, I think we're at all-time lows in passion and attention. And so I don't think it's in my best interest or the company's best interest or the community's best interest to release things when no one really gives a shit. And I think I've been on Twitter for a long time now, and especially in this space, staring at it for the last 18 months, when I look at the Twitter sphere, I think we're all-time dead when it comes to passion. But I think we're just at the bottom of it. So once we gain a little bit more momentum, we'll schedule a release date for that and hopefully ship a product that helps revolutionize and provide value to holders, which at the end of the day, I think is the most important thing. If we can continue providing value for holders, whether it's my project and other people with other NFT projects continue to do that, I think ultimately we will all win, and the space will get bigger and bigger.
I'm excited to see Project Overpass hit the light of day. Couldn't agree more about moments. I don't think we're dead. I just think maybe people are out touching grass. I'm hopeful that the fall we start to see that uptick, and we'll most definitely be following along. And we hope to have you back, because I think once it's on its way out, we can definitely do a deeper dive. There were so many topics that we could have spent a lot more time diving deep into. I really appreciate your candor. I really admire the grit with which you've moved through this space and in life. So thank you so much for joining. I definitely want to thank Lou and Janet and Chad for organizing this for our members, and look forward to seeing, I guess it's X now, it sounds weird, on Twitter, and also seeing you in the real world on Amazon and in other things. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be back soon, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.